Hey, you guys, Erin here. I am back with another moon update for you. Today, I'm going to be talking about the new super moon we have coming up here on Tuesday, May 7th. This new moon takes place at 8:21 p.m. Pacific time and is all coming through the lovely sign of Taurus, 18 degrees Taurus. So hopefully you guys are getting familiar with this routine. This is a time to manifest new beginnings or growth that is related to this sign of Taurus. Approximately 6 months from now, we will have a full moon in the sign of Taurus. That would be the peak of this growth cycle. This is something I've been doing for many, many years now. Every single time we have a new moon, and it's extra powerful when it is a new super moon. I pull out my journal, I write down the growth I want to experience that's related to that zodiac sign, and then I like to take a few gemstones that resonate well with that zodiac sign and put them on top of my journal, find a special place for that journal overnight. And this is how I brought a lot of things into fruition into my life. So what I'm going to do in this recording is I'm going to break down this sign of Taurus for you in detail so you know what you're working with here. I will also be pulling up the chart and showing you the other prominent astrological forces we are receiving for this new supermoon. And I will also be talking about certain parts of the body that are ruled by the sign of Taurus, because these parts of our body become more sensitive anytime anything up in the sky transits through the sign of Taurus. But we have a boatload of celestial energies coming through the sign of Taurus. So it's definitely a good idea to pay a little extra attention to these parts of our body. And I will also be mentioning some potential herbal remedies to help support these parts of our body during this kind of transit. And of course, I will be bringing up some gemstones that resonate well with the sign of Taurus. I certainly don't want anybody to feel like they're missing out on anything if you don't have any of the Taurus gemstones. However, you can always find a full extensive list of stones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through in the description below, as long as you are seeing this on YouTube. Okay, so let's get into this. This sign of Taurus, this is what we call the fixed earth sign. When I say fixed, what I'm talking about is an ability to get into a rhythm and stick with it. The fixed signs don't want to be flip-flopping all over the place. This is about consistency and persistency, and especially in the element of earth, okay? All the earth signs tend to come with a little more stability. So now we're talking about the fixed earth sign. This is like the most steady, stable sign of the zodiac. If maybe you want to manifest more stability into your life, this would be a good time to do that. Okay, now the sign of Taurus is ruled by Venus. That's part of the reason why the sign of Taurus is so lovely. Venus is the influencer of love and beauty and harmony. This is actually a very, very sensual energy, as I've mentioned so many times. People who've got Taurus sun, Taurus moon, Taurus rising, Venus and Taurus, these people tend to make really good huggers. It's like they just have this grounding, centered feeling to them when you put your arms around them. Certainly not every single Taurus is going to be like that, but I happen to enjoy this energy a lot. Okay, now also the sign of Taurus, the motto for the sign of Taurus is I possess, okay, and not as in like being possessed. It's rather material possessions. This is actually, out of all the zodiac signs, this is the sign that's most directly associated with finances, money, your earning powers, okay? It's like the sign that says, okay, I'm going to work hard so that I can be able to be compensated for my hard work so that I can go out and purchase or consume or possess the things that I enjoy so that I can live a little more comfortably. Okay, maybe you've been trying to manifest something new into your life. Maybe you've been just trying to manifest, a healthier flow of finances into your life. This would be a really good time to do that. Now, also, this sign of Taurus is also very strongly associated with food. I'll get further into this later on in the recording, but the sign of Taurus actually rules the mouth area, the taste buds, the tongue, the lower jaw, the throat, also has an influence on the thyroid. So it's a good idea, again, to pay attention to these parts of our body. But also, this sign of Taurus, a lot of people, again, Sun in Taurus, Taurus rising, Taurus moon, and Venus in Taurus, sometimes even Mercury in Taurus, maybe Mars in Taurus, but not so much, tend to do really well with food. It's like they've got good, strong taste buds. They've got a good palate. They know how to make food. They enjoy making food. They understand the value of good quality food. This sign is actually really all the earth signs, but they're associated with agriculture. Food that's growing out of the earth. And, something that comes to mind for me with this kind of transit is, manifesting, putting your money towards your local farmers, maybe a health food store that's in your area or some kind of store that supports local farmers because these people deserve it, in my opinion. There's a lot going on. If you haven't seen anything about that, there's actually Uranus is going through Taurus, has been since 2018, and there's a lot of protests. Uranus influences things like protests. So there's a lot of protests going on because these massive corporations have taken over so much of the local farmlands. Okay, so that's some, or even just manifesting growing your own food. Of course, that's always a wonderful idea as well. But maybe just manifesting eating higher quality food, that sort of thing can come through with this kind of transit. Okay, now also the sign of Taurus, this is, like I mentioned, it's the sign that's associated with finances, and that has a lot to do with consuming, not just buying, but also consuming food. This could be a really good time to enjoy a nice quality meal. Okay, so hopefully you've got the gist of the sign of Taurus. It is the fixed star sign. It is ruled by Venus. The motto is I possess. Oh, and it's represented by the bull that is very strong and sturdy. Interestingly, I can't remember exactly where it is, but there's some place in New York, I think it might be on Wall Street or something, somewhere where there's a lot of financial stuff that goes on, stock market exchanges, that sort of thing. And there's a giant statue of a bull. And I don't know anything about it, but it just seems that there's got to be some sort of a connection there. Okay, so be thinking about these things. How do you want to grow in these ways? There's a lot of Taurus energy coming through here. So we could really work with that energy to bring things into fruition into our life. Okay, so I'm going to leave that there. Let's go ahead and pull up the chart here, start going through some of these placements. So for those of you who are new to my recordings, I work with geocentric Western astrology. So with that said, what we're looking at here is basically a snapshot of the tropical zodiac at the time of this new moon. So with geocentric, that means we just put Earth right here in the middle of this thing. These symbols right here are the symbols for the planets and the celestial bodies on the outer part of the wheel here. And when we go in the wheel just a little ways, these are the symbols for the zodiac signs that all these things will be beaming through at the time of this new moon. Okay, so let's start with the sun and the moon. All right, here's the moon right here where I'm moving my mouse. The moon is always easy to find in a chart because it just looks like a crescent moon. Okay, and we see this coming through 18 degrees and 2 minutes Taurus. And directly right next to the moon, we see the sun also coming through 18 degrees and 2 minutes Taurus. This is what happens every single time we have a new moon. It means the sun and the moon are exactly in the same spot in the zodiac. If you're new to this stuff, what happens is the sun goes around this thing every single year. It takes a whole year for the sun to go around the chart. The moon goes around the chart every single month. So with that said, that's why the moon catches up to the sun every single month. And it's like the moon is the mother, the sun is the father, and they're coming together to create this energetic baby that really does grow over the next 6 months till we have that full moon in the sign of Taurus. That's why we can really tap into this energy. I wouldn't be doing this for so long if I didn't see such incredible results coming from it. Okay, now, one of the things I want to point out first is this right here is Venus. This is such a neat transit because we have Venus and Mars both in their own homes. You'll see what I'm talking about here. So here's Venus also coming through the sign of Taurus. So Venus is at peace here. Venus is, it's like she's in her own castle. She knows where everything is. She gets to work comfortably. She gets to work gracefully in the sign of Taurus. It's such a lovely, and again, using that word sensual kind of energy, not just sexual sensual, but rather, knowing how to give a good massage or that sort of thing. Just a really nice touch to this kind of energy. Okay, this could be actually a really nice transit for some relationships. It's also so important to keep in mind that so much of this depends on your own natal chart. And I should have mentioned that earlier. It's like we all experience this as a collective. Everybody on Earth is experiencing this new moon at 18 degrees Taurus. But of course, it's also very, very unique to each and every one of us. And so much of this depends on your own natal chart. We all have a natal chart. And as long as you know approximately what time you were born, you can see what area of your life this is specifically activating for you. Which house in your natal chart does a sign of Taurus rule? And I might say some things right now that might go over some people's heads, and that's perfectly okay. You just take what information makes sense to you. We learn astrology in baby steps always. Okay. But when it comes to these lunar transits, I like working with the whole sign house system. I do work with other house systems. It just kind of depends on what system or what form of astrology I'm working with. Okay, whether if I'm working with medical astrology, if I'm looking at just a natal chart, or if I'm looking at transits. But if you can calculate your natal chart for free on so many different websites, astro.com, astroseek.com, there's so many of them. What I'm working with here is a software called Time Passages, which I personally really enjoy working with. But no matter what you're using, no matter if you're using a software or an app or a website, there should be a way, there is a way to go change the preference settings to a whole sign house system. And that way it's easier to see which one of these little things that looks like a slice of pie, which area of your life do you see this little symbol for the sign of Taurus coming through? Now, if you are using Placidus or Regiomontanus or the equal house system or whatever it is, your house system that you prefer, then of course you're going to need to see exactly where 18 degrees Taurus comes through. Okay. But if you do have something in your natal chart, no matter what it is, if it's Mercury or Jupiter, whatever it is, if you have something in your natal chart that's at 18 degrees, or say between 16 and 20 degrees Taurus, this is a very, very powerful new moon for you. Or maybe you've got something opposing that over here near 18 degrees Scorpio, or maybe squaring that near 18 degrees Aquarius or Leo. Okay, there's so much that can be said when we apply this stuff specifically to our own natal chart. Okay, but again, if that's too much for you, that's perfectly okay. I encourage you to learn these things, but I understand not everybody's got the time to do that. And it's perfectly okay to just work with this sign of Taurus in and of itself. Okay, so this right here, again, is Venus. If you've got anything near 10 degrees Venus, Taurus in your natal chart, then Venus is sitting on that thing in your natal chart, and she's bringing you warmth. She's bringing you love. This can sometimes bring in a new lady into your life, no matter what, if you're a male or female or whatever. It could be a new lady neighbor moved in, or maybe a new sister, or maybe a new girlfriend, that sort of thing. Venus really does, she has a lot to do with the female energy in our life. Okay, now, right off the bat, we also need to point out here's Uranus. Now, if you've been following astrology at all, then I'm sure you heard that we had that major Jupiter-Uranus conjunction on April 20th. That was a big deal. And what is a little frustrating for astrologers is that I've had people say to me, well, nothing happened on April 20th to me. Well, doesn't mean it's going to happen on April 20th. It really doesn't, especially if you don't have anything in your natal chart. That was, I think it was at 20 or 21 degrees Taurus. They went exactly conjunct. But what happens is, Jupiter, which is right here now, Jupiter just passed up Uranus. Okay, but that only happens approximately every like 12 to 14 years that Jupiter will cross over Uranus. And it's almost like these guys just came along and put those orange cones, the street cones, or trying to block something off for traffic or whatever. It's almost like those guys put these orange cones down and said, okay, there's going to be some energy that's going to be, kind of ignited here. Through this next cycle until the next Jupiter-Uranus conjunction. So Uranus brings revolutionary changes, abrupt, unpredictable. A lot of times it can have a lot to do with technology. A lot of times it can have to do with electricity. Sometimes it can have to do with storms, that sort of thing. Coming to the sign of Taurus is going to have a lot to do with Earth. Again, Taurus is really like the Earth of the Earth signs. So a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction can lead into things like earthquakes or something along those lines. But what this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction did, Jupiter is the great expander. Okay, Jupiter, whatever Jupiter touches, he goes boom, and he blows it up and makes it a bigger deal. Jupiter is the great benefic as well. Jupiter does bring luck and abundance and wisdom and philosophy. If you've got anything in your chart near 20 degrees Taurus, then you are bound to be expecting some big changes in your life, unexpected changes, because not only was Uranus creating great changes, but Jupiter came along and made it a bigger deal. Now, this is in part what I'm talking about with the farmers and the protests that are going on and all sorts of things. Very, very strong revolutionary changes happening here on Earth. Uranus will be in the sign of Taurus all the way until some point in 2025. Jupiter will be out of Taurus in May. Jupiter actually moves into the sign of Gemini in May. That's going to be something interesting to talk about when that comes along. Okay, so now let's talk about Saturn over here. Saturn going through the sign of Pisces all the way till late February of 2026. So Saturn brings discipline and responsibilities. Saturn is old Mr. rigid, and Pisces is so not rigid. Pisces is the mystic. Pisces is flowy and spiritual, and Pisces is the sign of oneness. Everybody get along. And so Saturn does struggle in the sign of Pisces, but I personally feel like this is bringing in, for some people, especially if you've got anything in the sign of Pisces at all. Saturn entered Pisces in March of 2023, and again we'll be there all the way to 2026. So if you've got any planets in the sign of Pisces, Saturn already has or will be crossing over that planet, and this very well could be bringing into your life, taking your spiritual practices more seriously, taking them to the next level. Saturn can have a lot to do with lessons. Saturn can make you okay, let's say you're somebody who's been practicing meditation for a long time, and all of a sudden Saturn comes up and hits maybe your Mercury or something along those lines. If it's your sun, something like that. And all of a sudden Saturn says, we're going to take this a lot more seriously. We're going to be very disciplined with this practice, whatever it is. It also could have a lot to do with water. Pisces is a very watery energy. It is a water sign. It's the mutable water sign. And not only that, but Saturn is making a very opportunistic connection with this new moon. Here's Saturn at 17 degrees Pisces. The new moon is at 18 degrees Taurus. These green lines that we see right here, that means Saturn and the new moon are getting along. Saturn's saying, hey, let's make some more opportunities. Go on with this new moon. Okay, now moving forward, this right here is Neptune, which has now hit the 29th degree of Pisces. Okay, so we've been talking about this for a while. I can't remember what year it was. I think Neptune entered Pisces something like 2012, which was so interesting because Neptune, as I mentioned, Pisces is the mystic of the zodiac. Neptune rules Pisces. Neptune is what makes Pisces that kind of flowy, spiritual oneness kind of energy. And so it's quite the gift to be alive while Neptune is transiting through the sign of Pisces. But I do feel that this has really, I mean, if we think back since 2011, how many people have hit some sort of a point in their life where they are way more open to some kind of spiritual energy, some sort of spiritual practice? The study of astrology has just exploded. I cannot believe how many astrology schools are popping up these days. Tarot cards, crystals, metaphysical shops, all sorts of things are just boom. And I personally feel like Neptune going through Pisces is playing a huge role in that. But the downside of this is that it's so unearthly, it's so dreamy that it very well could, for some people, be bringing in things that are not real. Okay, things that are, people can become easily manipulated with Neptune going through Pisces, especially if this is hitting something strong in your chart. And not only that, but if you've got anything in your chart near 29 degrees Pisces, just be mindful, just be realizing it's such a lovely transit. I'm at 28 degrees Pisces. Neptune just went over my sun. And to be clear, Neptune will actually retrograde back all the way, I think, to 27 degrees Pisces and then move forward again. And Neptune going over my sun, I know it made me feel very, very sleepy, very difficult to concentrate, but also extremely intuitive. A lot of almost like visionary energy kind of come through. But I also understand that it can make people, it can even have to do with addictions. Neptune going through Pisces is it's like altered states of consciousness. It can be very strongly associated with things like opiates, things like muscle relaxers, maybe even addictions of all kinds, that sort of thing. So that's another thing. If that's hitting something in your chart, you might want to be very mindful of that. Okay, now let's talk about all this Aries energy that's going on. Okay, this is great. I think we've got a nice, even though we've got very minimal air, like all the zodiac signs are either earth, air, water, or fire. And we have very minimal air for this particular transit. We've got a lot of earth, which I think is great, even though Uranus is kind of making that earth a little bit spasmodic. But we still have a lot of fire, a lot of good fire to keep us rolling here, but also a lot of watery energy to keep things flowy and mystical as well. Okay, so Aries. Let's start with Mars. Okay, so this is what I was mentioning earlier. So Venus is in her own home of Taurus. Mars is in his own home of Aries. Okay, Mars rules Aries. Mars rules over our adrenal glands and our muscles, and Mars rules over our physical willpower and our physical drive. People who have a very strong Mars in their natal chart tend to be very strong people, or pumping iron and driving big old lifted trucks and that sort of thing, or some kind of muscle car. That's very Martian energy. Can be very competitive. And the sign of Aries is really the sign that represents those things. The Aries is, again, ruled by Mars. So Mars is all revved up in the sign of Aries. Not only that, but Mars is approaching the North Node. So that's going to get even stronger. That's really strong Aries energy coming through. But it's so nice. This is what I'm talking about. Because we've also, I'll talk about this in a moment, we've also got Mercury and Chiron going through the sign of Aries. But that's a lot of really revved up, fiery energy coming through. But we've got this nice, lovely, soothing Taurus energy coming through to keep us grounded. But we've also got this very dreamy Piscean energy coming through. I personally really like this lineup here. Okay, now, as I mentioned, that North Node going through Aries, that's going to be there all the way until January of 2025. And that North Node is the pump that brings energy in. If there's a planet or some kind of zodiacal point or celestial body next to the North Node, then that North Node is bringing even more of that energy in with it because it is the celestial pump bringing energy into Earth. Okay, so again, Mars approaching the North Node, that's getting strong. Okay, now this right here is Chiron, which is pretty much exactly conjunct Mercury. Okay, so Chiron is the wounded healer going through the sign of Aries. I think that one's also till 2025. And I've mentioned this so many times. It's coming through Aries, the sign of self, the warrior of the zodiac. This is such an, especially while that North Node is still fairly close to Chiron, this is such a great opportunity to be healing ourselves. Look in your chart to see if you've got anything near. I mean, honestly, if you've got anything in the sign of Aries, then your chart's being lit up right now because there's so much Aries energy going on, period. But especially if you've got something near 21 degrees Aries, say between 19 and 23 degrees Aries, then Chiron, the wounded healer, is saying, hey, let's heal this thing. Maybe childhood trauma from past lives, whatever it is. And I'm putting a lot of emphasis on this because, which I don't normally put that much emphasis on Chiron, but because here's the North Node, bringing more of that Chiron energy in right next to Chiron, and even more so Mercury being exactly conjunct Chiron, off by minutes. Okay, they're both at 21 degrees Aries. Mercury rules over our mental function and our communication skills. Mercury rules over our nervous system. Yes, Mercury's a little fired up going through the sign of Aries, but those of us who have Mercury in Aries, I can appreciate this kind of energy. It gets things excited. It gets the brain activated. There might be a lot of pressure going on in people's heads. Aries really does rule the top of the head. And again, Taurus rules the bottom of the head. So there might be a lot of pressure going on there. I think I can come up with potentially some kind of herbal remedies to help support that. But that's just one thing to look out for in your chart. Okay, lastly, let's talk about Pluto up here. So Pluto going through the sign of Aquarius, who just went into retrograde. Okay, so Pluto, and well, I don't want to leave Uranus out. Uranus is not in retrograde right now, but when Pluto or Uranus, those are the two, at least from my studies out of several books that I've read, but also noticing it in myself, in the general population, in people's, clients who are coming to me. When Pluto or Uranus go retrograde, they tend to show their retrograde most powerfully, okay? Pluto is the ruler of the underworld. Pluto is Hades in Greek mythology, okay? Pluto is aggressive. Pluto is kind of gnarly, but Pluto is also the planet of power. Pluto can provide power as long as we are willing to go through a transformational process, a death and rebirth process. And I don't mean necessarily people dying. I'm more talking about something in your life that you just got to flush out, put that thing to death. That's not serving me anymore. I got to make room for the new powerful beginning. Then Pluto will in turn brings people power. Okay. People who have a very strong Pluto in their natal chart, say Pluto's right next to their ascendant or something. These people can have very powerful personalities. Okay. Now, if you can imagine this planet of power, if you think about yourself, when you're driving backwards, do you drive as gracefully as when you're driving forwards? No, and that's just like Pluto. Pluto is not as graceful. Pluto's really never great. I suppose Pluto can be somewhat graceful in essence, but Pluto is extra strong going in through retrograde. Okay, now what Pluto's going to do here, right? Currently at 2 degrees Aquarius, which I do, Pluto, other than this quick little retrograde, Pluto's got to do. He's going to go quickly back into the sign of Capricorn this year. But it's either at the end of this year, I think it's the end of December, Pluto will be done completely in the sign of Capricorn and will then be in the sign of Aquarius for 20 years. And I do think that Pluto going through this sign of Aquarius, the sign of Aquarius rules. It's the sign of humanitarianism. It's the sign of the people for the people. It's the sign that rules over electricity. It's the sign that rules over technology. It's, there's going to be some extremely powerful changes. I'm talking about AI. I'm talking about transhumanism. I'm talking about people becoming one with computers while Pluto's going through Aquarius. But keep this in mind. Okay, if you've got anything in your natal chart near, let's say between 29 degrees Capricorn and 3 degrees Aquarius, Pluto has already gone over something, whatever that is in your chart. Pluto already went over it, except for the 3 degrees. Pluto's hit 2 degrees Aquarius. Pluto's saying, hey, it's time for a powerful, powerful transformation regarding whatever this planet is in your natal chart. I got to roll backwards for a little while, and we're going to reevaluate this transformational process in a very powerful and probably aggressive kind of way, and then move back forward over that thing. So again, if you've got anything near between 29 degrees Aquarius, and maybe even we'll just leave it at 29 degrees Capricorn and 2 degrees Aquarius, I would put a lot of research into that, like how this can play out, how you can really work with this energy, because you really could be empowered, but it could also feel very turbulent in your life, okay, depending on what it is. Okay, now let's make myself a little smaller here and talk about this south node going through the sign of Libra all the way until January of 2025. That's not my favorite transit because I love the sign of Libra. Libra is the sign of balance and harmony and justice and fairness and partnerships and everybody getting along. Okay, it's a very charming energy. The south node is the drain point. So it's like taking some of that energy away. We have to experience that, but every 18 years, we got the south node that's going to go through this sign of Libra. But if you do have anything in your natal chart near 15 degrees Libra, then that south node is draining out whatever that is. Let's say you've got your Mars near 15 degrees Libra. Okay, I'm talking about anywhere between 13 and maybe 17 degrees Libra. If it's Mars in your natal chart, Mars is, again, our muscles and our willpower. Well, all of a sudden you don't feel so strong, or all of a sudden you lose some muscle mass, or all of a sudden you don't have such a strong willpower. That sort of thing could be going on through this sign of Libra. But the sign of Libra actually rules over the ovaries, and it also has an influence on the kidneys. Okay, it could be, especially if this is hitting something in your chart, this could be having something to do with ovaries, taking things out of your ovaries, something going on there. But it could also be a really good time for a kidney cleanse, flushing out the kidneys. And again, that south node is there all the way until January of 2025. Okay, I think I covered everything I wanted to there. Let's talk about body parts. Okay, so as I already mentioned, the sign of Taurus, it rules the lower jaw, the tongue, the taste buds, the throat, the thyroid. Okay, so, and not only that, but with all that Aries, Taurus also rules over the ears. And with all this, Mars going through Aries, North Node going through Aries, a lot of Aries energy going on. And then all this Taurus energy, a lot of people could be experiencing pressure around here. And of course, everybody's different. Some people might not even notice anything. But especially if you've got Taurus and Aries energy in your natal chart, you might be experiencing like some sort of congestion going on here. And for that, my favorite thing would be Cleavers. Okay, I'm not a doctor and I'm not trying to offer any kind of medical advice whatsoever. You should always check in with your healthcare practitioner. These are just things that I've learned from through the Academy for Astrological Medicine and Mind Body Institute and many, 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 many books and stuff that I've experienced for myself. Cleavers are really, really good for that. Not only that, but Cleavers are in season in a lot of places in the world right now. So potentially you can even harvest your own Cleavers. Just being around the energy of these plants can help with our whole entire system. Okay, now for the throat, maybe you're dealing with a dry throat or mucousy throat, or it depends on how this stuff is hitting your chart. For the throat, common sage blended with echinacea can be really, really good for the throat, especially like in a tea. And if you add in a little bit of, say, raw honey or something like that, maybe a little squirt of lemon or whatever you're into, can be really, really good for the throat. Black walnut hull is really, really strong anti-parasitic energy that goes through with black walnut hull. But black walnut hull can also potentially be good for hyperthyroidism. hyperthyroidism, but I don't want to go too deep into that because, again, I'm not a doctor and I don't want anybody to think I'm offering any kind of medical advice. Okay, now, as far as gemstones go, really, really interesting stuff with the sign of Taurus. So the dedicated zodiacal birthstone for the sign of Taurus is green emerald, okay, which trips me out a little bit because green emerald belongs to Mercury. Well, Mercury doesn't rule Taurus, so I don't get the connection there. If any of my listeners, any of my followers have any idea about the connection here, please leave a comment. I love reading your guys' comments, by the way. But I will say this, green emerald is very, very powerful. It's a beautiful stone. Unfortunately, I don't have a true, real green emerald, maybe one day. It could be really good for mental function. If you remember, I mentioned Mercury is the ruler of mental function, okay? And Mercury is Hermes in Greek mythology. Hermes is the author of the Emerald Tablet, okay? Mercury stone is green emerald. So if you're Taurus and, you know, somebody got you your birthstone of an emerald of some sort, there are other colors of emeralds, but green emerald specifically can be really, really powerful for mental function. They can also tend to be quite expensive if you're getting a really good high quality one. But for some people, it might be overstimulation. Let's say you're born with your Mercury in Aries or something like that, and it makes a strong connection with Mars. That might be like, whoa, way too much energy coming through here. But I will leave that there. So my favorite stones to work with this Taurus energy, I'm going to start here with rose quartz. Rose quartz is probably, I mean, one of the most popular, common, and beautiful and powerful stones there are. Rose quartz is calming, okay, and it resonates very well. And where I get this information from, well, a lot of my crystal information comes from the Encyclopedia of Crystals by Judy Hall, and very strongly resonates well with the sign of Taurus. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that rose quartz is very calming. So it's calming, it's also protective, but it's also amplifying, it's also cleansing. Okay, so rose quartz is a beautiful stone. I think everybody should have a little bit of rose quartz laying around. This specific tool right here is actually for, it's a massage tool, which is great for using when the moon is transiting through the sign of Taurus and rubbing the parts of the body that the sign of Taurus rules with a stone that resonates well with the sign of Taurus. Clearly not everybody's got rose quartz laying around, but maybe this would encourage you to get them. It's also not only that, but it's very, very affordable. You can get little tiny pieces for super cheap. Okay. The next one I'm going to talk about here is jade. These are two different colored jades. They're both dark green jade. Jade resonates very well with the sign of Taurus, and I think some of you might like to hear this. Jade is said to bring a lot of luck, but is also, I think the reason why jade resonates so well with the sign of Taurus is because jade is supposed to bring in a growth of finances, financial growth. So jade could be another really good one. And if you don't have these gemstones, you know, again, you can always find a whole list of stones that resonate well with the sign the moon is transiting through in the description below. And if you're like sitting here thinking to yourself, well, geez, I wish I had some of these gemstones. Pull out your journal and write down, I am manifesting whatever kind of gemstones you want into your life. New moons are a time to do it, especially if they're gemstones that resonate well with that sign that the moon is transiting through. Okay, so I think I will leave that there. If you would like to schedule an astrology reading, please do visit erinwageastrology.com. I do hope to hear from some of you. And until next time, namaste to all of you.